Welcome to the 21st Missed on Points podcast, kids. We're here to talk about the NFL draft. I know, it's been a little while since the draft, but we figured we'd take our time and have a moment to reflect and have a moment for the police to locate Eric and make sure that he was all right and make sure that he wasn't on his way to actually harm anyone. So we've had our moment to kind of consider the draft and talk about it, and we're here and ready to talk about all the issues in the draft that are important to us. So, Eric, are you ready to talk about the draft?
Come on. What are you talking about? I'm perfectly fine. Wait, who went number one?
Well, Jadeveon Clowney went number one, Eric.
Oh, well then fine. Well then, he went to the Falcons, right?
No, he didn't go to the Falcons.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Maybe we should have had someone on standby. Are there federal authorities or perhaps a local police, sheriff, crisis intervention?
This is the best Shaq impersonation I can do. If Thomas Dimitroff was in the paint, I would average 35 points and 11 rebounds, and I made him eat chicken noodle soup. The fuck, man?
Apparently it wasn't for lack of trying. Apparently we tried.
Oh, fuck off. He tried like a vegetarian trying to eat bacon.
I still say Sam Baker has pictures of Dimitroff eating bacon, and that's why he's still a Falcon. That's why Dimitroff says in the press conference, Sam Baker is our left tackle. Before Coach Smith has anything to say, but yes, apparently we tried to come up to get Clowney, and then apparently we tried to come up again to get Mack, and nobody wanted to trade with us. I don't know if that's because we're not willing to pay the price, or just because everybody decided
we're not willing to pay the price. I think listen, hi kids, I'm okay. You can see I am fresh out of rehab.
There's no guns visible in the video picture.
I'm going to find you, Dimitroff. Okay. Let's calm down. Take a deep breath for a second. This is very, very important. To my understanding, the deal would have been made if they would have traded 3 number ones. I did hear like a first, second, third, and then another number one, if I'm not mistaken. But let's stick with the 3 number ones for a second, because I'm sure that Houston kind of wanted the moon, which is kind of what Peter King said. Okay? Now we have a bit of a referendum, because now you've got those 3 players, essentially, versus whatever Clowney becomes. And if Clowney is just a above average defensive end, then the Falcons probably made the right choice, because I think you know what you're going to get from Matthews. There's he has a very low ceiling. A low floor, or a high floor, I guess. Because, generally offensive linemen aren't that big of a bust. You can move in a tackle, guard, what have you. And I like Matthews. Like I said before, if we didn't get him, the obvious pick for us would have been Matthews, because I am not a fan of Mack as a system fit with what the Falcons want to do. That being said, if you would have told me that I could have traded 2 future picks who I know nothing about, and I could have kept the draft we have now, and we're going to kind of go through this a little bit, I think there's a way you could have gotten Clowney and gotten your right tackle, who could have then became your left tackle. You've got the guy that went to Washington in the 3rd round who legitimately failed, and McShay and both Kuiper were like, the guy was the top 20 pick. So maybe they know something we don't know, and of course they are much more involved in this, but the fuck? Oh my God.
Look, here's this is the thing I think that we're going to have to struggle with when it comes to this, is that Clowney gets picked by Houston, and Houston's got J.J. Watt. Right?
Wait, did you hear the rumor that at Dave & Buster's they announced, 92.9 announced that the Falcons traded for the number 1 pick in the draft?
No.
Yes.
And then they had to take it back.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it kind of took itself back once Clowney was handed a Texas
trip. Right.
And that did not go over well for the Falcons.
Well, I thought the rumors were pretty solid right up before the draft that the Falcons were not in fact going to trade for it. If you've been following the podcast, all 3 of you, that follow the podcast, you know we're one of the few people other than the Falcoholic. So shout out to the Falcoholic. That actually knows that D. Orlando Ledbetter who's the beat writer for and I'm going to call him out, who's the beat writer for the Falcons, is the most unreliable source of information for the Falcons draft I've yet to see. That dude,
want to disagree with you on that.
No, he was reliable right before the draft. He was totally unreliable leading up to the draft.
Sure.
And not only was he unreliable leading up to the draft, he was disingenuous about his information. So if what he does for a living is serve as a mouthpiece for the Falcons to forward disinformation that the organization wants to give to its enemies, then he's doing a great job. If his job is to provide reasonably accurate information to the fan base, he's doing a terrible job. And I'm fed up with this nonsense that he keeps saying that sacks don't matter, and he thinks it's funny, but he doesn't actually provide any real information or real analysis about the Falcons' defense. I'm fed up with him, but ultimately he actually had good information. What frustrates with him is that I think he does have good information. I just think that he doesn't. I don't think he provides it, and I don't think he differentiates his good information from his bad information. But whatever, At the end, there was a consensus that the Falcons were not going to take Clowney, that they weren't going to trade up, and there was only, I think John Clayton was the only one who was still saying that we might trade up for Clowney right before the draft. He was the lone voice that some of us were still clinging to.
Well, I mean, we had very first, actually, Joe Bellin, we actually had a source who had inside information.
Yes.
Shout out to our source. I was texting you this on draft day that the Falcons were actually indeed trying to trade up. So I think there was an effort there. The question was, why didn't the Falcons? And that's a very important question.
And I think your source was accurate. The notion that this was some sort of smokescreen, which was Orlando Ledbetter's actual reporting on this question, that it was all a smokescreen, that was a lie. And we now know for actual fact that the Falcons were trying to trade up. They were trying to trade up all the way through actual draft day. And it was only when the Texans finally said no that they stopped trying to trade up, because we just weren't willing to trade 3 draft picks. But let me get back to my original point on this, and that's that the Clowney has been taken by the Texans, who have J.J. Watt, who is one of the few actual front 7 stars, legitimate stars in the National Football League. And so if J.J. Watt continues to be a really solid player, even close to his traditional output in the NFL, then it's going to be really hard to tell what Clowney would have been in Atlanta, because there's no one in Atlanta like J.J. Watt. And if Clowney's really great in Houston and Watt's really good in Houston, then some of Clowney's strength is going to be because Watt's taking attention away from him. So if we look back in 5 years and Clowney's just killing it in Houston, we're going to have to say that some of that production is because Watt is there to take some attention away from him. And I don't want to take anything away from what Clowney could become. I'm just saying Clowney is now in a position in Houston that is fundamentally different from the one that he would have been in Atlanta. Now, I'm sorry, the other thing that you do have to say about this is that it's very unlikely that Houston's offensive productivity will be anything like what the Falcons' offensive productivity will be like. And so, this sword sort of cuts both ways, and you wonder what Clowney would be like in a system where the other team is going to probably have to be really productive offensively to keep up. Does that mean that he would be unleashed more in a Falcon system? Does that mean that he would be
Bayless now? You unleashed, really?
No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to use the animal metaphors. Does that mean that he would be that there would be more opportunities for him to go after the quarterback in our system? Does that mean that there would be less? If you look at what the Falcons have done, in the last couple of years, it means there would be fewer blitzes.
When you say less, you're ableist.
Yeah, that's right. If it means that the Falcons are going to be more aggressive on defense in the future, it might mean that there will be more opportunities for him to blitz. It's really hard to say, but there is a fundamentally different situation in Houston for Clowney than there would have been in Atlanta. So I do think we have to take that into consideration. But I'll go on record saying I think three first-round picks for Clowney is too many. I think that is Houston. Not only is that price too much, but I think that is Houston intentionally setting the bar too high because they do not want to be talked out of that pick.
I think I think the three first
Houston
round.
doesn't want to take Bortles and be wrong.
No, I think what kind of became, if you've read the story on like Jacksonville and Broyles, which was he wasn't falling past 3. The GM who used to work for the Falcons told no one but his wife up until the last second, and he was just like, you know what, Bortles our guy. And I think in a world where the Texans probably could not get him, I think they made maybe the trade down possibility unlikely. But I'm dealing with the 3 first-round picks because that's the highest price we're aware of. And I think that, we don't know who these other first-round picks are, right? We don't know if they're going to be late 20s. And we'll talk about the draft in more detail here in a second, but when you look back at the Julio Jones deal, you really can't name anybody that got taken with those picks that you remember, or maybe even they're still on a roster. Like that list of players is like the law firm of Schlock and Schlock. I mean, really.
Yeah, that's true. But we could go back. We could go back just because we haven't done the work. We could go back. Last year's draft was not great, and we could go back and take a look
for the Falcons or just overall.
Yeah, we could go back and take a look at who we could have drafted at different positions. The fact that those names don't spring to your mind isn't an indictment. Look, you're right. We don't know who those future draft picks are. That cuts both ways. Again, though, those draft picks could we could find ourselves in a situation in future drafts where there isn't a lot of talent or there isn't the match for who we need. We could also find ourselves in future drafts where we really need someone, like for example the tight end that we didn't get this year. And there happens to be someone there, and we don't have them because of the Clowney pick. It's a really difficult choice, but I think 3 is too many if that was the request. And I do think that's Houston trying to talk themselves out of having to pick either Bortles or at number 1 and being wrong, or as you say, I think it's a really good point. Trading down and having to pick not Bortles, right? Whoever number 2 is at the number 6 position, and perhaps. Using a questionable metaphor, overpaying, right? If it's Manziel or whoever it is that's number 2 on their board at that point.
Results. Shut you down!
Right.
All right, let's talk. Do you want to talk about the Falcons draft then?
Yeah, let's talk about the Falcons draft because I think we've discussed Clowney far enough. We'll evaluate that later as the years go on. Let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons draft. Let me find it here. So. Obviously, the Falcons don't make any major trades except for, I think, to trade back into the 5th. So with the first pick in the 6th round, I'm surprised I don't have that queued up already. The Atlanta Falcons select Jake Matthews, Texas A&M. And if that last name sounds familiar to you, it's because literally every male in that family has played tackle.
That's right.
I'm not joking. Someone posted the actual family tree, and it's just guys who are on NFL rosters pass blocking. Apparently, he wanted an extra piece of chicken at 5, and his dad was like, no pancake block.
Yep.
So Jake Matthews, I think Jake Matthews can play in this league for 10 to 12 years. He is technically sound. If you go back and watch any of the Texas A&M games, you will notice 2 sides of an offensive line. It's the side where there was pressure, and then there was Matthews' side, which is
right.
Who are you? Nope, you can't go here. How are you? There's a rumor that he's already pancake blocked Matt Ryan's girlfriend. So it's a child. But listen, I like to pick Jake Matthews, number 6. Everyone agrees he's the most ready offensive tackle. I actually think he's better than the one the Rams took. I understand the Rams are going on upside, but I'm gonna be flat out honest with you. That guy can't pass block. He can run block.
And the Falcons need protection right now. They need somebody who can play right now. They need a turnkey offensive lineman.
Yes. Now, admittedly, had Matthews not have been gone, and then what's his name? Was it Robinson? What was his name?
Robinson was the first offensive lineman taken.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if Robinson would have failed to the Falcons, then that makes sense. But if they were both there at the same time, they should have taken Matthews. You're right. They need a guy that can plug in right now. Play right tackle. We'll shift to left tackle when we say goodbye to Sam Baker. That pick works. I'm
still very disturbed by that whole press conference dynamic where they were talking about projecting Sam Baker at left tackle, and Dimitrov inserts himself into that conversation and says Sam Baker is our left tackle when that's got to be the coach's thing to say. I don't like that at all.
Well, this isn't new. Like a lot of like first-year offensive linemen, like listen, the tackles that were drafted last year were not nearly as good as the first maybe 4 tackles drafted this year. And to kind of take that pressure off of them, they do put them at right tackle or even left guard sometimes to kind of like integrate them into the offensive line. Matthews' time will come if Baker struggles or gets hurt again. He will instantly be shifted over. But I'm okay with that. When Sam Baker was healthy in 2012, he did a pretty reasonable job. He wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible either. Like he was, steady.
Yeah. I mean, that's fun. That's all fun. Like Baker had a couple decent seasons. It's funny to me that people have like stepped up to his defense and talked about how he had these great seasons. That's just not true. There's no statistical backing for that argument.
I will say that one of the reasons that I didn't think we should trade up for a tackle was because when healthy, the offensive line was fine in 2012, and we were one play away from the Super Bowl. Now
that offensive, maybe if you say when healthy, I don't know how healthy it was. I think all of us that were watching that offensive line in 2012 held our breath the whole time, and that was clearly the problem with that team.
No. The problem with that team was that they didn't have defense, which,
I mean on the offense, yes, you're right. The problem with that team was it didn't have defense. But on the offense, that team was always like a hair's breadth away from Ryan gets sacked. That team could not run the ball effectively when it needed to.
Sure.
I watched that offense with great concern that year and was sort of shocked that there was no attempt to address that problem in the draft.
Let's kind of get to that for a second. So, Jake Matthews at 6. How do you feel about that pick? I feel like that's the right pick.
That's absolutely the right pick. The first several picks, the first 4 picks, there's not much that you can say other than we couldn't trade up when we wanted to because we couldn't find a trading partner if you believe the Falcons line and the reporting after the draft leaves you no reason to believe otherwise. And we got aced by who was it? The Raiders that took our player right before us in the second round that we thought we were going to pick.
Right. I think Atlanta really thought Mack was going to fall because the Raiders took a wide receiver.
No, I'm talking about the second round when the pass rusher that we were looking at got picked.
Oh, no, the Cowboys.
The Cowboys.
Yeah.
And it's telling that I started mistaking Jerry Jones for Al Davis. But I think that the pick we made in the second round's fine.
Rashid.
He's got some decent ability to put pressure up the middle. We've now got James Herndon's consistent concern that we cannot stop the run has really been addressed pretty stoutly through this draft. The next we got a decent DB in Des Southward. Devonta Freeman is apparently quite a good pick for us at running back.
He's outstanding.
All of those, and all of those picks are fine. And I'm not as familiar with Prince Shembo, but apparently.
Let me jump in here for a second because I want to talk about this. The Falcons took a couple of guys with some character, quote unquote, flaws in this particular draft, particularly. Prince, where's his name at again?
Shembo.
Where is he? Yeah. Where is he? Was he a 5th round pick or 4th round? 4th.
He's a 5th round pick. A 4th round pick, I'm sorry. Second 4th round pick.
So for those of you who don't remember this, there was an incident at Notre Dame a few years back where a young lady committed suicide because she said she was sexually harassed by a football player. That football player happens to be Prince Shembo, who has been very open about what happened, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he said, there were some things done. He said we probably shouldn't be doing this, and he said he cut it off, and he said that is what actually triggered the incident. I'm not going to, question what happened in that incident, but it is a stout departure for the Atlanta Falcons to take a guy who has character issues. Generally, he intangibles, he's given a 4. Because of that particular incident, even though no legal charges were filed. But that guy could be your outside, linebacking pass rusher because on talent alone, he's pretty good, but probably fell because of character issues. Rashid Hageman has some issues. He has a very interesting life story, kind of like the Blind Side 2, so to speak. But, a guy that kind of had a hot and cold motor, so to speak. Freeman is just like, the ideal football player. He eats, sleeps, loves football. He is literally raising his family of, I think it's like 7 brothers and sisters, I believe.
Yep.
It's funny, when you saw him being picked by the Falcons, you saw Luke Campbell from Two Live Crew in the background.
Yeah.
Who for those of you who don't know who Luke Campbell is, shake what your mama gave you. But Luke stepped in and told him he had to be the man of the family at this point. And Luke has kind of been a quasi-godfather. And if you're from the Miami area and you're a kid kind of down on your luck, Luke is your godfather, so to speak. And so I think Freeman is going to be an outstanding back. I'm not going to get into all the other picks. But there were, it was quality, I suppose. But, Joe, what was your draft grade for the Atlanta Falcons?
It's funny. I was actually just sitting here. One of the best things that ESPN does, just in terms of providing a nice little packaged resource, is Kuiper's draft grades. Not so much because I like his grades, but because I like the formatting that they do, where they give you absolutely everyone's picks all in a row on one single page, which I like without video interruption. Kuiper gives them a B-. I give them more like a B to a B+, and I don't give them a B to a B+ because I think they did a bad job. Right, I give them a B to a B+ because I think that they couldn't ever make that 1 or 2 moves that they wanted to make to move up to kind of get the player that they wanted, to make a big splash. And I don't even think it's Clowney, although that would have been fantastic, right? If they could have moved up to get Clowney at a decent cost, we would have really loved that, and then they could have addressed some O-line issues. I think it was more in the second or even third rounds when they could have moved up to get a really interesting pass rusher. That's kind of the moment that they didn't have. And I think if you look at the draft order for the Falcons, what you see is, need, best possible need, and then after Devontae Freeman, what you see is exactly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 picks, hoping they could find either pressure on the quarterback or depth in the backfield. But after Devontae Freeman, there are 5 picks, one of whom is Ricardo Alden, who's a DB, and in those 5 picks, the Falcons are hoping that they're going to find someone who can pressure the quarterback. They're rolling the dice to find that, or they're rolling the dice to find depth in the front 7. And that's what you're looking at. And so because of that, I can't give them an A-. I can't give them any better than a B+ in the best of all possible worlds. I'd probably settle for a B. But I think it's a good I think it's a good draft for them. You can't ask for a whole lot more than that just because they couldn't move up even though they tried. I think it's a good effort. What about you?
No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
The Falcons get a C+ for me, and I think it's for the reason that you just stated, which is they were not able to get what I felt like was their biggest glaring need, which is a pass rusher. You could have sold me on a middle round pick on a tackle to develop. Fine. You could have in the 3rd round actually gotten the best of what universities consider the best available player in Morgan Moses, who actually went 2 picks before Des Southworth. So that guy fell to the 3rd round. You probably could have got him in the 2nd. Hageman may or may not have been there in the 3rd, but who knows? To me, this draft hinges on one player.
I just want to insert myself. There's no way in hell Hageman would have been there in the 3rd. That's right.
Why? Moses was there in the 3rd. What are you saying?
Hageman would definitely not have been there in the 3rd. There was,
really?
No, I was following this as it was happening. He was projected to go in the 2nd, where he went, or right afterwards. There's no way he would have.
Well, let's just say this about projections for a second. Like, Moses was projected to be a top 15 pick, top 20 pick. He was definitely a first rounder, and he goes in the 3rd.
Well, whatever. Like, there's no way Hageman would have been there in the 3rd. That's
okay. But listen, look. Michael Sam's running mate with Missouri, Coney Ely, I think I'm saying this wrong.
Yeah.
Fell to the end of the 2nd. So you don't address the pass rushing need. So, but But be that as it may, the draft, in my opinion, hinges on Hageman and also on Prince Shambo. Because if they are able to generate a pass rush, then you go from a C-plus draft to arguably a B-plus draft, maybe even A-plus considering what Matthews becomes. But if you don't get a pass rusher out of this draft, and you draft a defensive tackle, even though we signed, what was it, 1, 2, 3, was it 4 defensive tackles?
At least 3. I don't know if it was 4.
Yeah,
I lost track of some of those late signings.
There was a ton of defensive tackles. Hageman is not going to play up the middle. He's going to play the end, according to the NFL. They've already slotted him at the end.
No, that's true.
That if he can get, if he can be like J.J. Watt, then you've got something there. But if he's just a guy that stops the run and they can't rush the passer, I'm earthly confused by a lot of these picks. I thought in the third round they took the wrong safety. Southworth is fast, but there was a safety taken by the Ravens, Terrence Brooks from Florida State, who I thought was infinitely better than Southworth. So I thought they reached a little at that particular pick. So the Falcons get a C plus for me, with the possibility of a B plus depending on how the players pan out. But right now it's a C plus draft in my opinion.
Let me make one counter argument against what you had to say, and then one argument in favor of what you had to say. I think rather than Shambo, although if Shambo turns out well, I think you're right. It definitely improves the draft. I actually think it's Des Southward who, other than Hageman, I think everyone kind of agrees that Hageman's one of the players that makes or breaks this draft for the Falcons. But I think it's Southward. Des Southward. If Des Southward is a really serviceable DB for the Falcons, then he vastly improves the quality of this draft. Because when I was looking at the signings that we made in the offseason, I felt like we were kind of desperate. And we had some real needs at safety. And honestly, a little bit at corner. We just have depth problems in the backfield, in the defensive backfield. And if Southworth turns out to be a really good player, that vastly improves the quality of the draft. One thing I didn't say about grading the Falcons draft that I think could definitely argue in favor of downgrading them from a B to a C plus is their failure to get a tight end.
Well, they signed one leg, but I agree. They did not address or get an additional tight end. I think they are sold on. I cannot pronounce the guy's name.
Tololio. Look, that part. Maybe they're sold on him. That's the corporate line. But there's no question, if you watch that draft unfold, that the Falcons missed the run on tight ends. This was not a deep tight end draft to start with, and the Falcons missed the run on tight ends. And there is reporting that there is reporting they tried to move up into the draft to get a tight end, and they failed. So the failure to get even depth at tight end is a problem. I know that we did. I know the Falcons didn't think there was much depth at that position in the draft to begin with. So I don't know. Maybe we weren't trying very hard, but yeah, that's definitely an argument in favor of downgrading them. All right, what next?
Well, let's look at this. Let's look at the grades for the NFC South. We'll start with the division champs, the Carolina Panthers, who had a decent draft, or maybe not. They ended up getting Kelvin Benjamin, Florida State wide receiver, who is young and raw. They did get a good pick with Coney Ely out of Missouri with the second round pick. But not much else that kind of stands out to you. They didn't get a tackle. They needed a tackle. They needed a safety they didn't address. For a team that won the NFC South last year, I don't think they reloaded well very, very much at all. I actually give them a C minus.
Yeah, that's more or less what Kuiper gave them. I'm not as familiar with their off-season signings, but when I look at the Panthers, I see a team that needs more offensive weaponry, and probably, like you said, I think their defense is entirely suspect. If you watch that team play at all this last year, they had some really good offensive potential. They actually had their running game actually came back a little bit, for anyone who's ever had who's been holding out hope that one of those Carolina Panthers running backs would start producing for you in your fantasy league, it actually happened a little bit this year. And then they would lose because they could not stop anyone. And as you look down
they couldn't stop anyone, they couldn't score. I think they couldn't score. San Fran's got a great defense, but they had nothing to challenge what San Fran could do on defense.
No, that's true. And they, they had some running potential, but and then they lost their best offensive production weapon on the wide receiver position. Maybe Kelvin Benjamin fills that position, but I don't know that they did much else. Look at that list of who they drafted, and I don't, other than maybe Benjamin, Coney Ealy's definitely a good value pick for them. I don't know that you look at anyone else on that list and you go, wow, they improved themselves. That's a draft that you look at and go, certainly the Panthers are not one step away. They took a big step backwards this year, and not for any, unlike the Falcons, not for any reason that you could necessarily point to and say, oh, that's why. The Falcons were devastated by injury. The Panthers, not so much, and yet they took a huge step backwards. You look at the Panthers draft, and I don't see them necessarily addressing any of their big need areas. So I think a C or a C minus is a reasonable grade for them.
Going on to the
they didn't have a ton of picks, by the way.
No, they did not have a ton of picks, but going on to the New Orleans Saints. The Saints in the first round took Brandon Cook out of Oregon State, smallish speedster kind of guy. And I talked to a friend of mine who's a Saints fan, and we both kind of agree, which is rare, that they need to get tougher on the outside. Like, they're not physical, and they got pushed around by Seattle and still almost had a chance to kind of come back and maybe steal it until Marcus Colston threw the ball in the middle of the football field. I don't know what that was about. But, I don't think Cook makes them any tougher. He's certainly fast, but not that much tougher. Stan Jean-Baptiste, who is a promising cornerback, but is not physical at the point of attack. And when you're playing against what, we'll get to Tampa Bay in a minute, but what Tampa Bay is going to have and what the Falcons should have, you're going to need to be very tough at the point of attack with the receiving corps. And then after that, I don't know anybody else here that's utterly impressive. I think Kuiper likes Cook, and therefore he gives them a C+ grade. He likes Stan Jean-Baptiste if he gets developed. I don't see this draft being better than the Falcons draft. And if I gave the Falcons a C+, I'll give this draft a C, maybe C-.
Yeah, and maybe I'm missing their development program, because it does seem like the Saints are one of those teams that takes players that you haven't heard of and makes them better. But it seems to me like the Saints are one of those teams that relies on having a lot of moderate to high skill offensive players. They are either losing a bunch of those players, or those players are aging, and I don't see them replacing. Maybe they're replacing one of those players in this draft, but not a lot of the rest of them. Colston's getting older, and I wonder whether their tight end is going to be as good now that they've franchised him, and he's actively suing them. So I wonder if that's not going to cause a little trouble in paradise. The Saints are one of those teams I've been expecting to take a step back for a couple of years. But, say what you want to about Drew Brees, he's a really good player. And he's got to be a fantastic leader in the locker room because of what he's been doing with that team. He's been putting them on his back. One of these years, they're going to have a year like the Falcons did this last year.
Well, they had that because of bounty gates to a degree, but yeah, I understand.
But I thought that was a year where they stepped forward. But one of these years, they're going to have a year where they take a big step backwards because of a reduction in the quality of their talent. And I wonder if this year isn't that year.
Yeah, their talent is kind of eroding around Brees. And, one of the things that I had said when I was talking to the friend of mine that's a Saints fan was, if Johnny Manziel was available, and he was available to the Saints, should you take him? And my rationale for this was, Brees isn't getting younger.
Yeah.
Manziel and Sean Payton would be a perfect marriage because of what Manziel can do and what Payton can design. And you kind of have a guy who are kind of both similarly sized quarterbacks. Manziel, he can be taught how to throw from Brees. Let him sit for a few years. New Orleans would love him because he kind of has the swagger that they like.
That's where I'll disagree with you. I think that's the problem, is that I think Brees has poisoned the well in New Orleans for Manziel, because Brees is all about service and humility. And Manziel is the exact opposite of that.
I think, but that's something that Manziel can learn from Brees. I think one of the things that people say.
Yeah, if you think that's true, then I think you're. Everything else that you say is right. Everything else that you say.
One of the things that they said during the interview process was that Manziel was outstanding during the interview process because it was a mixture of cocky and showing humility. And I think that, that would have been a better fit than, say, going to, the Browns, who just lost Josh Gordon. But that was an interesting thing. I thought that they would consider that, and they didn't. But what do you say about the Saints? You want to give them a C?
No, I'll give them a C. I don't think that's a good draft for them.
Okay. And then what I think what we all can do is, say is the team that got the best grade out of the draft was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whose first two picks are just outstanding. Mike Evans to pair with Vincent Jackson. You've got a basketball team of guys that's 6'5" that can just point the ball.
Yes.
And you follow that up by getting Austin Jenkins. I cannot pronounce his hyphen name. Who was also like 6'6", 6'5".
That will be. I predict that will soon become Austin Superior Jenkins.
It will become Austin Superior Jenkins. It will be something impressive.
Yeah.
The first two picks they got are outstanding. Then they get the running back Charles Sims that made Nick Shulo very happy.
Yep.
They got Kareem Edwards and a couple of guys later on, but their draft literally was made with those first two picks. Now, Kuiper gives them a B+. I also give them a B+. They did not have a lot of picks to work with. They did not improve their pass rush as well, but they added to what could be a very stout offense next season.
Yeah, and that team is going to live or die for the very short term on whether or not Josh McCown is actually a quarterback.
Or whoever is the quarterback. Because I thought the quarterback they had last year showed flashes, but yeah, you're right.
And well, they've hooked their card to Josh McCown. There's no question right now. I mean, that's what they did with this draft, right? Like that's part of what Kuiper's problem with what they did is that he thought that Johnny Manziel should go there. I mean, it's bizarre to me that all these people are putting Johnny Manziel so high in the draft. And
I'm a Manziel fan. I thought he should have been high as well.
He's so small.
That bothers me not.
It bothers me a lot. Like, look what happened to RG3.
He's small. I mean, and was a second-round pick, by the way.
Yeah, I mean,
there are small quarterbacks that can succeed in the right system. Now, they've got to be in the right system.
Yeah, I don't know. Do we even know enough about what Tampa Bay's system is or will be? No, that's a strong point. It's just like all I'm saying is that regardless of what should have been or could have been, they have hooked their cart to Josh McCown for at least a year, possibly more than that, and we'll see. And stranger things have happened, right? Like he could be good. That could be a really interesting team in a division or a conference where everybody thought the Panthers were the comers, right? And that was going to be the story. You could very easily see Tampa becoming the team that's really challenging New Orleans and let's hope the Falcons for being the team that's shooting to be the wild card, shooting to be the best team. I'll be very interested. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's that team's a B+. They probably had a better. It's hard to say they had a better draft than the Falcons. They didn't have as many picks to play with, but those top picks were outstanding for them. They did a great job.
The draft fell in a way for them that just was perfect. And I think, the Johnny Manziel talk, Joe, I think kind of transitioned us very well into one of our last kind of quote-unquote draft questions, which is, who do you think had the best first-round pick? Who do you think had the worst first-round pick? We're just kind of looking at it, talking about the draft, but who do you think, when you see a pick and you go, that's an outstanding pick, and then you see a pick and you're like, I have no idea what you were doing?
Well, let's talk about best first, I guess. I think Clowney's a great pick for the Texans, but I think Clowney's a great pick at number 1.
Okay,
I wonder if he is the best pick for the Texans.
Okay.
And the reason I wonder that is that I don't know that he necessarily addresses any of their gaping needs. When I see the Texans, I don't know that I see a team that is failing because they don't get enough pressure on the ball. I see a team that has a lot of holes, frankly, and I don't know that he's the person that necessarily they needed, the one person that they needed to fill their needs. In fact, I'm not sure that there's any player right at the top that you say, wow, that was a fantastic pick, way to go, great work. I don't know that there's anyone spectacular. The Falcons pick is a solid pick. It's not necessarily a wonderful pick. If you had to say to me, like, who's the best value pick, I guess, in the first round, I might have to go with the Vikings trading back into the first round to get Teddy Bridgewater.
Whoa.
And here's why. First of all, the Vikings must have a quarterback.
Sure.
They have been.
I don't think they have one, but sure.
They have been the shame of the league. Watching Adrian Peterson be humble about what's going on there has been painful. They have been the shame of the league. Trading back in to get a quarterback who I think is going to be better, at least at first, than a couple of the guys taken ahead of him, and doing it at that point, I thought was really smart, uncharacteristically smart for the Vikings, who, let's face it, have not been known lately for their great drafting habits. When I look at a value pick, for me, if I had to pick one, just pick one person out of the first round, I think it's Bridgewater at number 32. What about you?
That's interesting because that will start the. That is actually one of the picks I don't like. I was never high on Bridgewater, and I took some flack from some Louisville fans back in the day because when he was carving up an overrated Florida defense, everyone was like, "Oh my God, Bridgewater's going to be this special guy," and I didn't see it. I didn't see the arm strength. I didn't see the charisma. I didn't see anything that made me go, "This guy clearly is going to be a great quarterback." And then he had his pro day where he blames gloves because he was inaccurate throwing the football. Now, I am not an elite football player by any stretch of the imagination, but I have thrown with gloves on and I have thrown with gloves off. And my accuracy did not change that much. And I've seen Peyton Manning throw with gloves on and gloves off, and his accuracy didn't change that much. It was probably an even better comparison than myself. So, to me, I thought trading in, I understand why they did it. You get that fifth year to control Bridgewater as opposed to the fourth, which means you can't control him. And I think that's kind of become the trend of NFL teams is to trade back into the first round. I'd rather have this guy in the first because of the pick, but because of the second. But I think Derek Carr's a better quarterback than he's going to be. Like, I really do. I think if you're going to trade back in for a quarterback, I would have taken Carr, who, when I see Bridgewater, I see a guy that will not be on an NFL roster in 3 years. When I see Derek Carr, I see kind of like a budget version of Jay Cutler with a better character. Because one of the things they've talked about
that's not saying much.
But his character is like an A1, is what I'm saying. I don't know if he doesn't have the same arm strength as Cutler, of course, but all those things talent-wise, Carr is a better quarterback.
All right. Well, who's your best in the first round then?
There were a couple of places that I like. I loved what Buffalo did to trade up to get Sammy Watkins.
Really?
Yes, Sammy Watkins is going to be a beast. And quite frankly, the Buffalo Bills needed a number one wide receiver. Now, why did you trade your number one receiver from last year? Fine, I suppose, but I think Sammy Watkins is going to be special, Roddy White level special.
Okay.
But I think the place that I'm going to go to kind of hang my hat on. I also like what the Ravens did by getting C.J. Mosley. I think that's an excellent pick. But Aaron Donald to the Rams at 12. You've got those bookends at defensive tackle and another first-round defensive tackle. And now you've got a guy who is disruptive at getting to the quarterback at the D tackle spot. That's an outstanding pick. Outstanding pick. And quite frankly, the Rams would have had one of the greatest drafts I've ever seen if they would have taken Sammy Watkins instead of Robinson, because I think Sam Bradford doesn't have the weaponry to succeed right now, and I think Sam Watkins would help. But Donald absolutely is an outstanding pick.
Can I make one more pick? And this is going to make you upset too, but I actually think if you hear my logic, you may agree with me. One more best of pick.
Okay.
And that's number 5, the Oakland Raiders selecting Khalil Mack. And it's not because I think Khalil Mack is necessarily the greatest defensive player.
Are you saying that's a good pick, or are you saying that's a
best of?
Oh, okay, I'm with you now. Okay.
And here's why. Because the Oakland Raiders, for the first time in a long time, had a high-level draft pick, and they picked a real football player.
Sure.
Say what you want about whether or not Khalil Mack is the greatest, whether he would have been a fit for the Falcons or whatever. The Oakland Raiders picked a player that you look at and go, hey, that's a good football player. That actually fits with your needs. That's a player that most of the pundits and scouts and people that look at him go, that's a really good football player, unlike what the Raiders have been doing for the last 10, 15 years, which is pick players that you scratch your head and go, what the hell is that? Or that's a reach, or oh my God, you picked that guy because he happened to play really well in one game that Al Davis saw, and you wonder what the hell the Raiders are doing as an organization. To me, that pick is and actually many of the subsequent picks the Raiders made represent kind of a sea change in the level of professionalism at the Raiders organization, or at least if you're a Raiders fan, you hope that that is the case, where the Raiders are now starting to act like a real football team again. Yeah. And so whether or not Mack is the greatest player ever, I thought that was one of the picks that stood out to me because I really thought that it seemed like the Raiders are acting like a real football team. And look, I went to some Raiders games when I lived in the Bay Area, and I don't like the Raiders fans, although I do like their sports bars a lot. Ricky's, shout out to Ricky's, to anyone that's out in the Bay. It was my favorite sports bar in the Bay Area. There aren't a lot of them, but Ricky's was freaking awesome. Get the Joe Montana sandwich, by the way, if you're out there. But I don't like the Raiders fans. I don't like the atmosphere. But the NFL is a better place when the Raiders are a decent team.
Well, the Raiders and the Cowboys, yeah.
Yeah, when the Raiders are not just a laughingstock and they're a good team, a decent team, the NFL is a better place. I liked that pick. What about worst for you, Eric?
I'm actually going to change my worst pick. The reason I'm going to change it is because I understand the logic of trading back in to get Bridgewater, even though I don't think he's a good quarterback. If they believe in him, they want that fifth year of control. The worst pick in the first round is easily the Eagles taking Marcus Smith, who I thought was a reach at defensive end. The Eagles chose to take him over like Coney Ely, for example, who I thought is an infinitely better football player. Funny that I'm actually down on two Louisville football players, but there you go. D Ford, I guess. But yeah, I think the worst pick was probably Marcus Smith, probably followed by the Patriots taking Dominic Easley, who is coming off of 2 ACL surgeries. I'm not sure why you take him in the first round. I also don't understand why they took a quarterback in the second. It's almost like the Patriots didn't care about this. To be quite honest with you.
Yeah, it was a very strange draft for the Patriots, I have to say. I'm not a big fan of the Bills trading up to get Watkins, and
your volume is kind of sketchy.
Sorry about that. I'm not a big fan of the Bills trading up to get Watkins. Not because I don't think Watkins is great. I think he is. Just because I think it's really weird for them to trade all the way up and to pay as much as they did. I don't think that's a good value pick. It's certainly not. I think both of your picks for worst pick are absolutely great. The Titans pick is really odd.
Lewan
is a weird pick for me.
That boy's nasty. Like, he's going to be one of the dirtiest players in the NFL.
Yeah, he may also be on the most imprisoned players in the NFL. When you look at the Titans, I guess they need, they couldn't get Chris Johnson any running yards. Is that the fault of their O-line? I look at the Titans and I see a team that has no offensive firepower. I guess if you are the Titans staff and you think the reason for that is their O-line, then I guess that's a good pick. But can you now name a single member of the Tennessee Titans that touches the ball on offense?
Well, here's what I'm going to say in defense.
I will take that as no. And after the draft, you cannot name any more either.
No, I don't know anybody that can run.
So I wonder whether that is or catch the football. I really question whether that's where you want to go. I think the Chiefs pick is really weird. But yeah, to me, the Titans, I scratch my head. And I wonder if that isn't just the Titans going to continue to be the Titans.
Honestly, I'm actually going to defend the Titans pick. Actually, the Vikings taking Anthony Barr at 9 was a bit of a head scratcher, but I think when you look at your board, you're looking at who is the best available player, and then you look at the difference between the best available player and the position of need. And you can make the argument that he could have took Odell Beckham at the pick right after them, who went to the Giants, who could have been a guy to help their offense. But I think you look at Lewan and you're saying to yourself, he's the last of the great offensive tackles. There were 3 offensive tackles that were kind of right up there. And then you had the guy from Notre Dame, and they were like, "Listen, we're just going to take the best available player. We're not going to take Odell Beckham, or who else? Brandon Cooks. We don't need a quarterback. Kelvin Benjamin. Like, those are the wide receiver players that were taken. They didn't go defense. I think they just took the best available player. So that's why I think that pick is okay. But
I mean, to me, at that point, if that's the case, you trade down, right? But
surprisingly, there wasn't a lot of that trading down.
Yeah,
it looks like a lot of people failed,
but there were a bunch of people that traded back into the first round, right? Like,
sure, there were people that traded back into the first round.
There were buyers at that position. I can tell you for a fact there were buyers. The Falcons were buyers at that position.
Yeah, which still begs the question why you couldn't get it done. Listen.
But I mean, obviously they liked him, and the Titans historically don't have a problem with trading back up. So I'm not. Yeah. All right. Anything else on the draft?
Well, not on the draft itself, but we do have to talk about a particular football player taken in the 7th round. This will be the last topic we'll discuss. This is the missed on points last topic. And it's kind of poignant because of where he was taken in the draft, but Michael Sam becomes the first openly, not gay player, but openly gay player. There are probably, and I can almost say with 100% certainty, there are homosexuals, gay men playing in the NFL right now who are not.
Yes.
Anyone that disputes that is a fucking idiot.
Yep.
But Michael Sam becomes the first openly gay player to be drafted. He was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year, which I actually didn't know until it came out. So there are several questions here. And from a social aspect, from a football aspect, but Joe, you are, the academic individual of the group. What do you say about this particular? What does this pick mean socially, and then what do you think it means from a football perspective?
Anytime that you've got an individual who is a first member of a group that has been historically denigrated, that represents, otherization, that represents oppression, social intolerance, there's going to be, first of all, that moment is always important, regardless of what people say, and that moment is important. You always have to be very careful and reticent about making direct comparisons between groups of people. Okay, so I'm not going to say Michael Sam is Jackie Robinson. He's not. The situation is very different. Those two groups of people are very different. But when you look at Jackie Robinson's experience, you can learn things that then teach you about what experiences might be like for other people who are in, experiences of newness for folks that have been, who are members of groups that have been the subject of intolerance. And Michael Sam is going to have to be, we know this from Jackie Robinson, we know this from many other people, he's going to have to be better than any other player in his position. He's going to have to act better, he's going to have to be an exemplar. And he'll have a higher standard put on him than anyone else. He's already had to turn down this opportunity for a documentary to be made about him because people were complaining about it, because people are upset that he's getting attention, which is ridiculous.
Really?
Yes.
We'll talk about that in a second, but okay.
But he's, because he is suffering from the attention, but is not allowed to benefit from it. It is an important moment. It is an important moment. It is important that he is the kind of player that he is. I think it is not an accident that the first person to come out is a defensive player who is a lineman rather than an offensive player who might be a punter or a special teams player like a punter or an offensive player who's like a wide receiver. Defensive players are associated with a certain kind of machismo that I think Michael Sam uses to offset the kind of stereotypes about gay men. I think you're still going to see issues. You've already seen issues with intolerance crop up around Michael Sam. I think he will open doors. I think it will be a difficult road for him because it always is. It always is whenever you have the first person. I hope that he is successful. I think he is a good player. I think it was, it was good that St. Louis took him. I wish some other teams had taken him earlier. I think based on his talent, he probably could have gone earlier. I'm very encouraged by the media's willingness to cover his reaction, in particular the reaction that he had with his boyfriend right afterwards. I think that's a signal moment. I think it does reflect an increasing tolerance and openness for this sort of thing in the United States, but I also think it's going to be difficult, and it does provoke backlash. There's no question. That is the other thing that happens when you have this sort of thing that will occur. It does become a lightning rod sometimes, and I think it is a challenge for everyone else. Michael Sam's been living with this his whole life. This will not be new to him. It is a challenge for the other players. It is a challenge for the media. It is a challenge for the fans to step up and act human and act with decency and check themselves. It is an opportunity for all of those people. And it is an educational opportunity for everyone who is involved to better themselves. The small optimistic part of me hopes that that will be the case and that this will be a great story of triumph. The cynical part of me thinks that there will be many bumps along the road where bad things will happen. And this documentary thing to me is already part of that, because I think it's an indication of what happens where people who suffer from intolerance are expected to suffer from that intolerance and never ever benefit from it. That they are expected to just shoulder the load of intolerance and never do anything, never have anything good happen to them. That suffering is supposed to be some sort of penance that one pays for being the member of a group that has intolerance directed toward it, and that bothers me quite a bit. But it's this sort of thing will happen as we mature as a society.
There's a couple things I want to point on. You talked about. I kind of want to have a point about. I think I've said from the very, very beginning that I thought Michael Sam, the football player, probably will be drafted late, 6th or 7th round, and I was right. I didn't think he was talented enough to be drafted sooner. I am unsure whether or not him coming out affected his draft stock adversely or negatively. I think he probably goes around maybe 2 higher if he doesn't come out, or he gets drafted because he is openly gay, because there are a lot of people who said he is not draftable because of his measurables. And I want to reference this to Stephen Height.
He's a little
pointed out, the SB Nation had an article write-up about what they thought Sam could be, and he does have some qualities that are good. His motor is extraordinarily high. He is very good in pursuit and in chasing down the play. But he isn't very strong in terms of actually being strong, like the point of attack in a bull rush move. He didn't seem to be able to do much after that, and that's things he can develop and work on. I personally didn't have a problem with the kiss. I thought it was, what you would probably see anybody would do that has their lover next to them and they get drafted to the NFL. They have an emotional moment. His moment is more emotional because of who he is, or I guess what he is, I suppose, than anything else. I do want to talk about the documentary for a second. I think that this is something that Stephen A. Smith has talked about where I kind of agree, which is that those individuals who are in support of Michael Sam also must be tolerant of those who understand the culture of the NFL. And in the culture of the NFL, as a rookie, you generally don't make noise. You come in, you do your job, and you play football. Michael Sam himself says, I just want to be known as a football player, not as an openly gay football player, or a gay football player, or the gay football player. And a lot of people questioned the documentary and said, okay, if you just want us to know you as a football player, why are you documenting the fact that you are an openly gay football player? And you bring up an interesting point. He should be able to benefit from it. But I think that there's a time when he should benefit from it. And right now is the time for him to prove that he's a football player. Because I think that is the biggest question people have. People aren't questioning whether or not it's okay for an openly gay man to play football. I don't question that. I think anybody with a reasonable perspective.
People are.
No.
They're not.
Listen what I'm saying. Listen what I'm saying. I said people with a rational perspective are not questioning whether or not he can be openly gay and play football. But those same individuals who are like myself question whether or not he is a talented football player. And I'm unsure if he is that talented. I think the one trick that he has is to get around the edge and get to the quarterback. Absent that, I don't know what else he can do. He could make it on special teams. He could develop into a rotational football player. But I think, I thought the documentary thing was a bit odd, and I looked at it this way as well. I thought Sam also wanted to set himself up in the event that football didn't work.
Yes.
And I think Sam was perfectly understanding of this logic. Sam says, I need to be able to create a niche for myself a la Michael Strahan for life after football, because my shelf life may be extraordinarily short because of who I am and certain intolerances people may have. But I think the pressure then came from people who were kind of not – I view the camps like this: intolerant people, uber-tolerant people, people in the middle that are like, I really don't care, let's just see if you can play football. And the people in the middle who said, I don't care, I just want to see you play football are also kind of questioning, like, okay, you don't want us to think of you as just a gay football player, and that's the reason you should play football. You want to be known as a football player. Fine. I don't get the documentary. And now the documentary goes away, he caves. I honestly think the documentary will come back at a later date. Like, I think that if he gets cut and he is like Tebow away from football and not able to sign with the team, all of a sudden the documentary comes back into play.
All right.
I think they postponed it. They're probably still filming it.
Let me just jump in and say one more thing about that. I think that last point that you make is the telling point. The documentary is being made. Mm-hmm. Like, several documentaries are being made. Mm-hmm. The only question is, does Michael Sam get to benefit from it? Does he get to directly participate in it? Does he get to be the voice of that documentary or not? And I think the point of comparison is not Strahan, it's Tebow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? When Tebow is the center of all this stuff, and the circus follows Tebow everywhere, and Tebow is the center of all of this, yeah, there were a couple of people that said, well, I don't know if this is really appropriate, but not nearly the outcry, and he did not have to shut it down.
Well, right? I think Tebow was shut down for him because he wasn't good.
Well, wait, but not like this, not with this rapidity.
Well,
right?
Hold on.
Wait. Let me finish. The question, there was not a questioning of the legitimacy of this. I understand the culture of the NFL as well as anyone else who's not a player, like that you as a rookie are supposed to keep your head down and not be noticed, but everyone knows that there are certain people that come in with a celebrity about them, and Tebow is one of those people whose celebrity outshone even his ability, and everyone knew that, right? And there wasn't until it turned out that he wasn't really that good.
Sure.
Nobody made him shut down the celebrity.
Okay, let me.
But Michael Sam was forced to shut down the celebrity, and this is the debate argument I want to make, and this is the last thing I'll say about this. The documentary thing is not unique and inevitable, right? It's going to happen, and that is what upsets me about this, is that the so-called people in the middle are not in the middle, right? They are voting with their feet or with their opinions with the people that you refer to as not rational, right? They are siding with those people even though they don't intend to, because they are saying, well, I'm just going to see, I don't really care, but in supporting this notion that he's not supposed to, that he's just supposed to go along with the culture of the NFL, they are in effect forcing him out of something that I think he has every right to be an intimate part of, because it is his life that is now going to be commoditized by someone else. That inevitably commoditized by someone else, when other people who have his celebrity don't get forced out of that because at some level they buy into this notion that there's something illegitimate about him.
Let me say this, a couple of things. I think the Tebow
and I've got to go, so I've got to go pick up my daughter. But so be quick.
Oh, sure. The Tebow comparison, I think you're talking about a guy that was a first round pick, a guy who we weren't unsure of talent wise, versus Sam, who a lot of people had questions about his talent. Then we found out that Tebow really couldn't play football.
I think a lot of people that were unsure about Tebow's talent.
I think, however, that if it is inevitable that the documentary happens, then I think the issue of forcing him out of the documentary is not an issue, because it will inevitably happen. We will stop this conversation. Yeah. We'll stop this conversation here, because this is a conversation that needs to be developed. Bellin has to leave, so look out for part 2, Missed on Points, our opinion of the Michael Sam situation, which will be coming out hopefully during this week. Joe, will you be free?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll finish up our conversation on the Michael Sam thing then, but listen, comment about it. Let us know what you think about some of the things that we should cover and discuss about Michael Sam, and we'll talk about it on another show.
Absolutely.
All right.
Enjoy, y'all.
Tell Zoe hey. And, as always, we didn't miss on points this week, although we did because we didn't draft Michaels. We didn't draft Jadeveon Clowney.
That was Dimitrov missing on points, y'all. Sorry about that. We tried.
No, God! Oh, God, please.
Later!